Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Whisper Zone. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious. Where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. The night I saw my first dogman, the moon was just a thin silver smile in the sky. I wish I could forget what happened after that, but some things stick with you forever. My name is Michael Whitehawk, and I'm a tracker here in Yellowstone National Park. Been doing this job for 15 years now, and what I'm about to tell you, well, it changed everything I thought I knew about our world. That morning started like any other. I was drinking my usual black coffee on my cabin's porch, watching the sun peek through the pine trees. The air was crisp, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled. Nothing unusual for Yellowstone, but something felt different, wrong. The birds weren't singing their morning songs, and the usual rustling of small animals in the undergrowth was missing. Nature was holding its breath. My radio crackled to life. "Mike, you there? We've got another one." It was Sarah, one of our newer rangers. Her voice had that edge to it, the kind that meant trouble. "Another what?" I asked, but I already knew. The answer: dead cattle, like the others. You need to see this. 20 minutes later, I pulled up to the Peterson Ranch in my beat-up Jeep. The old truck had seen me through countless searches and rescues, but lately, I'd been using it to investigate things that didn't make sense, things that shouldn't exist. The sight that greeted me made my stomach turn. The cow lay in the middle of the field, torn apart with surgical precision. This wasn't the work of regular wolves or bears. No natural predator kills like this. The cuts were too clean, too purposeful. And those tracks around the body, they started as wolf prints but then changed mid-stride into something else. Something that walked on two legs. Sarah stood nearby, her face pale. "What do you make of it, Mike?" I knelt down to examine the tracks, feeling the weight of my past pressing down on me. 15 years as a park ranger, plus my time as a Special Forces survival instructor, and nothing had prepared me for this. But the stories my grandfather used to tell me around the fire, the ancient legends of our tribe, those were starting to make a horrible kind of sense. "Those missing hunters last week," I said slowly. "They disappeared during the new moon, right?" Sarah nodded. 3 of them. We found their camp torn apart, but no bodies. Just like the others. I stood up, my bad knee creaking. "The one I'd busted in Nam, same mission where I lost my brother Tommy. The guilt of surviving when he didn't still haunts me, but the training from those days might be the only thing that keeps us alive now." Dark clouds were gathering overhead, even though the weather report had promised clear skies. I'd been noticing these freak storms more and more lately, always around the time something bad happened. The wind picked up, carrying a scent that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Wet fur and something else, something that reminded me of ozone and lightning. "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I want you to get on the radio. Tell everyone to stay out of the North Woods after dark. All patrols go in pairs now, no exceptions." "You know what's doing this, don't you?" she asked. I looked at the strange tracks one more time, remembering the protection rituals my grandfather had taught me. The ones I'd always thought were just stories. "I'm starting to," I replied. "And if I'm right, we're going to need a lot more than guns to stop it." Thunder rolled overhead, closer now. Too close. And in the distance a wolf howled. But no wolf I'd ever heard made a sound like that. This was just the beginning. And as I stood there in that field, with the wind picking up and darkness gathering in the middle of the day, I knew our world was about to change forever. The drive back to my office was quiet. Too quiet. Even my radio stayed silent, which never happens. In Yellowstone, we usually get all sorts of calls, lost hikers, bear sightings, the usual park stuff. But lately, it felt like the whole park was holding its breath. I pulled out my old leather notebook and started writing down everything we knew so far. 3 groups of hunters missing in the last month, 6 cattle killed, all during moonless nights. Strange. Tracks that changed shape, weird storms coming out of nowhere, local wolf packs gone missing. None of it made sense, at least not in the normal world I thought I knew. But my grandfather's voice kept echoing in my head. He used to tell me stories about the moon hunters, ancient spirits that walked like men but hunted like wolves. I always thought they were just stories to keep kids from wandering into the woods at night. Now I wasn't so sure. My office phone rang, making me jump. It was Bob Thompson, one of our senior rangers. "Mike, you better get down to Eagle Creek," he said, his voice shaky. "We found one of the missing hunters." 20 minutes later, I was standing at the creek's edge. The hunter's campsite looked like it had been hit by a tornado. The tent was shredded, camping gear scattered everywhere. But it was the trees that made my blood run cold. Deep claw marks ran up the trunks at least 8 feet high. No normal wolf could reach that high. "Found these too," Bob said, handing me a plastic evidence bag. Inside were 3 long, dark hairs. They looked like wolf fur, but something was off about them. They were too thick, almost like human hair. I was examining the hairs when Sarah called out from behind a fallen log. "Mike, you need to see this." She was pointing at a set of tracks in the mud. They started as normal wolf prints, then suddenly changed. The back paws lengthened, like something had stood up mid-step. The front prints turned into what looked like human handprints, but with claws. "This isn't possible," Bob whispered. But it was happening, and it was about to get worse. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on my cabin porch cleaning my old service rifle, even though I knew regular bullets probably wouldn't help much. The wind had picked up again, carrying that strange electric smell. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Channel 7 News Now." I turned on my small TV. The reporter was standing outside a local diner, talking about strange lights and sounds in the park. Behind her, the camera showed pictures of what people were calling a wolf man, just blurry shapes in the darkness. But I knew better. They were getting bolder, moving closer to town, and tomorrow night would be completely dark. A new moon. I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out an old wooden box. Inside was everything my grandfather had left me. Dried herbs, small bones, and a leather notebook filled with protection rituals written in our tribal language. I'd never used them before, never thought I'd need to. Thunder cracked overhead, making the windows rattle. In the distance I heard it, that same howl from the ranch, but closer now, much closer, and this time it was answered by others. I started copying the rituals into my ranger notebook. If what my grandfather told me was true, we were dealing with something that was part wolf, part spirit, and all killer. And they were hunting in a pack. The lights flickered, then went out completely. In the sudden darkness, I heard something moving outside my cabin. Something big. The porch boards creaked under heavy footsteps. I reached for my rifle, but then remembered something else my grandfather told me. "Iron and lead won't stop them, Mikey. Only the old ways can." The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I could hear deep, heavy breathing, and underneath it a sound like static electricity. I grabbed the box of ritual items and moved silently toward my back door. Whatever was out there, I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. First, I needed to learn more, to understand what we were really up against. Because one thing was clear. This wasn't just about missing hunters anymore. The moon hunters were back. And somehow, I knew they were here for more than just hunting. I spent that night at Sarah's ranger station in town. The next morning, I drove straight to the tribal council. If anyone knew what we were dealing with, it would be Elder Joseph, my grandfather's oldest friend. I found him tending his garden, just like always. But when I showed him the strange hairs and my notebook full of tracks, his weathered face turned. "Serious? I was hoping this day wouldn't come," he said, leading me inside his small house. "Your grandfather and we saw them once, 50 years ago. Lost 3 good men that night." He pulled out an old wooden chest from under his bed. Inside were yellowed papers and photos I'd never seen before. One showed a group of men standing around what looked like a cave entrance. The background, scratched into the rock, were symbols that made my head hurt just looking at them. The old stories call them shadow walkers, Elder Joseph said. They're not just wolves that walk like men. They're something older, something that lives in the spaces between worlds. But why are they here, I asked. Why now? They follow patterns, the stars, the seasons. He pointed to an old calendar on his wall. Every 50 years, when the stars align just right, the barriers between worlds get thin. That's when they come through. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. And what do they want? To expand their hunting grounds, to make more of their kind. He looked at me hard. You've noticed the weather, haven't you? The storms that come from nowhere? I nodded. They bend nature to their will. The Alpha, their leader, he's the strongest. He can call lightning, make storms. And during the dark of the moon, their power grows. My phone buzzed. Another text from Sarah. 2 more missing hikers, and we found something weird in Miller's cave. Elder Joseph saw the message. Go, he said. But first, he handed me a small leather pouch. Your grandfather's protection charms. You'll need them. The drive to Miller's cave took almost an hour. Sarah was waiting outside with Bob and 2 other rangers. Their faces told me this was bad. You need to see this yourself, Sarah said, clicking on her flashlight. The cave entrance was bigger than I remembered, and that electric smell was everywhere. As we walked deeper inside, our lights showed claw marks on the walls. Hundreds of them. But it was what we found at the back of the cave that made us stop cold. A den. But not like any wolf den I'd ever seen. The floor was covered with torn clothes and broken camping gear. Personal stuff from all the missing people. And on the walls, are those maps? Bob whispered. They were. Detailed maps of Yellowstone drawn with what looked like claw marks. Lines connected different locations, caves, ranger stations, even nearby towns. This wasn't random. They were planning something. Look at this, Sarah said, pointing her light at a pile in the corner. More of those dark hairs, but also something else. Something that looked like shed skin, gray and leathery. They're changing, I said, remembering Elder Joseph's words. Getting stronger. That's when we heard it. A low growl from somewhere deeper in the cave. Then another from behind us. Nobody move, I whispered, reaching slowly for the leather pouch. Inside were small bones and dried herbs that smelled like sage. The growls got closer. In the beam of our flashlights, I saw movement. Something big was moving in the shadows, walking on 2 legs. It wasn't alone. I grabbed a handful of the herbs, remembering the words my grandfather had taught me, the same words I'd seen in his notebook. The creatures moved closer. In the flashlight beams, I caught glimpses of gray fur, of teeth too, long to be natural, of eyes that glowed like storm clouds. We were trapped in their den, and outside I could hear thunder beginning to roll. What happened next would change everything, but at least now we knew what we were dealing with. The only question was, would knowing be enough to keep us alive? My hands shook as I pulled out more herbs from the pouch. The growling got louder, and now I could smell them. Wet fur and that lightning smell, so strong it made my eyes water. Everyone stay together, I whispered. Move slowly toward the entrance. We backed up, flashlight beams bouncing off the cave walls. That's when I saw them clearly for the first time, 7 feet tall at least, standing on 2 legs like people. But these weren't people. Gray fur covered their bodies and their faces. Imagine a wolf's head, but bigger, with eyes that glowed like lightning. Their hands had long fingers with black claws, and their legs were bent backward like a wolf's. Back legs, there were 5 of them. 4 moved like shadows around us, but the fifth one was different, bigger. Its fur was almost silver, and the air around it crackled with electricity. The alpha dot, a bolt of lightning lit up the cave entrance, followed by thunder so loud it shook rocks from the ceiling. The storm had come out of nowhere, just like all the others. The herbs, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Everyone take some. Make a circle. Sarah's hand trembled as she took a pinch of dried sage and bones. Will this really help? My grandfather swore by it. Said it was the only thing that saved him 50 years ago. The creatures moved closer. The Alpha raised its head and made a sound. Not quite a howl, not quite a word. The others responded, and suddenly I understood something that made my blood run cold. They were talking, planning. 2 of them darted left, 2 right, trying to split us up. The Alpha stayed in front, its glowing eyes fixed on me. It knew I was the one with the herbs, the one who knew the old ways. "Now!" I shouted, throwing the herbs in a circle around us. The words came without thinking, my grandfather's language, feeling strange but right on my tongue. The creatures hit some kind of invisible wall. They snarled in frustration, claws scraping against nothing we could see. But the Alpha, it smiled. Actually smiled, showing teeth as long as my fingers. Then, it raised one clawed hand toward the cave ceiling. Lightning struck right outside the entrance, so bright it blinded us for a second. When my eyes cleared, I saw cracks spreading across the cave ceiling. "Run!" I yelled. "Everyone out now!" We ran. Rocks crashed down behind us as the ceiling started to cave in. The creatures' howls echoed off the walls, mixing with the sound of thunder and falling stone. Just before we reached the entrance, I looked back. The Alpha stood in a gap in the falling rocks, that terrible smile still on its face. It pointed one clawed finger at me and made a sound that might have been a laugh. Then the whole cave entrance collapsed. We stood in the rain, gasping for breath. Everyone was covered in dust and scratches, but alive. What? Bob had to stop and catch his breath. What were those things? "Trouble," I said, watching lightning dance across the clouds. "Big trouble." Sarah picked up something from the ground, a scrap of paper that had fallen from my pocket during the run. It was the cave map the creatures had drawn, showing all their planned targets. And right in the center, marked with deep claw marks, was the town. "They're not just hunting anymore," I said. "They're getting ready for something bigger." Thunder rolled again, but this time it sounded like laughter. The Alpha's laughter. We had survived our first meeting with the Moon Hunters, but somehow I knew that was exactly what they wanted. They were showing us what they could do, testing us. And this was just the beginning. The next 3 days were the hardest of my life. We lost 3 good rangers. It started with Jake Martinez. He was doing a routine patrol near Beaver Lake when the storm hit. We found his truck the next morning, torn apart like it was made of paper. The radio was still on, covered in claw marks. Then, we lost Lisa Chen and Tom Wilson in one night. They were checking on some campers who'd reported strange noises. By the time we got there, all we found were their badges and torn uniforms. The campers were gone too. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the Alpha's smile, heard that terrible laughing sound it made. But worse than that were the memories that kept coming back. Memories of my brother Tommy in Vietnam, of the night I couldn't save him. "You can't save everyone, Mike," Sarah said, bringing me coffee at the emergency command center we'd set up. "You know that, but I had to try. I wasn't going to lose any more people." The town was getting scared. People had seen the creatures now, running across backyards at night, standing in the shadows behind houses. The local news was calling them wolfmen, but we knew better. I spread out the cave map on the table. "They're following a pattern," I said, pointing to the marks. "See? They started in the deep woods, then moved to the park edges. Now they're coming into town. But why?" That's when Elder Joseph walked in, looking more worried than I'd ever seen him. "Because they're getting ready for the turning," he said, laying an old book on the table. "The mass turning." The book was written in our tribal language, but the pictures were clear enough. They showed people changing into creatures like the ones we'd seen, under a dark moon. Every 50 years, Elder Joseph explained, they try to expand their pack. They don't just kill, they turn people into more of their kind. And the only time they can do it is during the darkest night of the year. Sarah checked her phone's weather app. "That's in 3 days, the new moon." "It gets worse," Elder Joseph said. "Look at this." He pointed to a picture in the book showing lightning striking a group of people. turning them into creatures. The Alpha uses the storm to change them. The more lightning, the more they can turn. My hands felt cold. That's why they're marking these places in town. They're not hunting grounds, they're turning grounds. Just then the lights went out. Not just in our building, but across the whole town. Through the window I could see the streetlights going dark one by one. Thunder rumbled, closer than ever. And in the distance we heard howls, dozens of them. "They're starting early," Elder Joseph said. "Testing their power." I grabbed my grandfather's pouch and my radio. "Sarah, get everyone to the community center. It's got a backup generator and it's on high ground. Bob, call every ranger we've got. Tell them to bring everyone they can find into town." "What about you?" Sarah asked. I checked my grandfather's notebook one last time. There was one ritual I hadn't tried yet, the strongest one, the one my grandfather said could banish them back to their own world, but it had a price. "I'm going to the old tribal grounds," I said. "That's where they'll try to complete the turning. It's where it happened 50 years ago." Elder Joseph grabbed my arm. "Michael, the ritual. If you use it wrong, it won't just kill you. It'll trap your spirit between worlds just like them." Thought about Tommy, about how I couldn't save him, about Jake, Lisa, and Tom, about all the people in town who would be turned if we didn't stop this. "Sometimes you have to risk everything," I said, hearing my brother's voice in my head. The storm was getting closer. Lightning lit up the sky like daylight, and the wind carried that now familiar electric smell. They were coming, all of them, and this time, running wasn't an option. The drive to the tribal grounds was the longest 20 minutes of my life. The radio crackled with panic. People calling about shadows moving through their yards, about eyes glowing in the darkness, about strange sounds that were almost words, but not quite. Sarah's voice came through. "Community center's full. We've got about 200 people here. Bob's bringing more. Keep them inside," I said. "No matter what you hear, don't let anyone out." Lightning split the sky, showing the empty streets in flashes of blue-white light. But they weren't really empty. I could see shapes moving in the shadows, running on all fours, then standing up to walk like people. More of them than I'd ever seen. I parked at the base of Eagle Hill, where the old tribal ground stood. This was where my grandfather and Elder Joseph had faced them 50 years ago. The place still felt heavy with old memories and older magic. My phone rang. "Elder Joseph. I'm sending help," he said. 4 tribal elders. They know the rituals too." "No," I said quickly. "It's too dangerous. You can't do this alone, Michael. The ritual needs at least 5 voices. Your grandfather learned that the hard way. That's when I understood why my grandfather had walked with a limp, why he never talked about the night they drove the creatures back. The ritual had hurt him, marked him somehow." I pulled out his notebook and the pouch of herbs. The paper was old, but the words were clear, written in his shaky handwriting, with notes in the margins like "blood must be willing" and "silver burns them." Headlights appeared on the road. An old truck pulled up, and 4 elders got out. Recognized them from council meetings. They were carrying pouches like mine, and each had a silver knife. "Your grandfather was our friend," the oldest one said. "We stand with you." More lightning flashed. The storm was right overhead now, but there was no rain. Just electricity in the air, making our hair stand on end. That's when we heard it. The Alpha's howl. But this time it was different. This time it had words. "Come," it called in a voice like thunder. "Face us," the other creatures answered, their howls mixing with thunder until it felt like the whole world was shaking. My radio crackled. Again. Sarah, sounding scared. "Mike, they're surrounding the community center. Hundreds of them. The backup generator just died." I looked at the elders. They nodded, pulling out their silver knives. "We need to form a circle," I said, remembering my grandfather's notes. "The ritual has to be perfect. If we make one mistake, we won't," the oldest elder said. "The spirits are with us." We climbed Eagle Hill as lightning danced across the sky. At the top, we could see the whole town spread out below. Dark shapes moved through the streets, all heading toward the community center, and walking up the other side of the hill, taking Its time was the Alpha. 7 feet of muscle and fur and terrible power, silver gray in the lightning flashes. 4 others walked with it. Its chosen pack. The Alpha smiled that horrible smile when it saw us. "Last chance," it said in its thunder voice. "Join us, or die." I thought about Jake, Lisa, and Tom. About my brother Tommy. About all the people. The community center. Waiting in the dark. "No," I said, and started drawing the ritual circle with sacred herbs. "This ends tonight." The Alpha's eyes flashed like lightning. "Yes," it growled, "it does." The elders took their positions around the circle. I could feel power building in the air, old magic meeting whatever strange force the creatures controlled. This was it. No backing down now. The final battle was about to begin. Everything happened at once. The Alpha raised its arms to the sky and lightning struck the hill 5 times in a circle around us. The other creatures charged forward, their howls shaking the ground. "Now!" I shouted, and the elders and I started chanting. The words felt like fire in my mouth, ancient and powerful. The herbs in our circle began to glow with a soft blue light. The Alpha's pack hit our circle like a wave, but they couldn't break through. The blue light pushed them back, making them howl in pain. But the Alpha just laughed. It pointed at the community center in town and lightning struck the building. I heard screams through my radio, then Sarah's voice. "Mike, they're breaking in." 2 of the elders broke the circle, running to help. I wanted to stop them, but I knew why they did it. People needed help. "Keep chanting," the oldest elder shouted. But with the circle broken, the blue light started to fade. The Alpha stepped through the gap, those terrible glowing eyes fixed on me. Its pack followed, surrounding us. My radio crackled again. Sarah's voice, stronger now. "The elders are here, they're holding them back." But we needed 5 voices for the ritual. Without them, we couldn't finish it. Lightning struck again, closer this time. The Alpha was only 10 feet away, its silver fur crackling with electricity. "Foolish," it growled. "Like your grandfather." That's when I heard new voices joining our chant. I looked around. Nothing. Then I realized where they were coming from. Grandfather's notebook was glowing. The voices of past elders recorded in those pages were singing with us. The Alpha's smile disappeared. It lunged forward, claws extended. I met it with my silver knife, remembering every fighting move I'd learned in Special Forces. The blade cut its arm, making it roar in pain. The other creatures attacked the remaining elders, but the blue light held them back. Our chanting grew louder, mixing with thunder and howls. The Alpha swung at me, its claws missing my face by inches. Lightning struck between us, but this time something was different. The electricity seemed confused, jumping between the Alpha and the glowing notebook. "Now!" the oldest elder shouted. The final words. I spoke the last part of the ritual, my grandfather's words burning in my throat. The Alpha tried to stop me, wrapping its clawed hand around my neck, but it was too late. The blue light exploded outward. A hole opened in the air itself, like a doorway made of storm clouds. Wind howled, pulling at the creatures. The Alpha's grip tightened. "If I go," it snarled, "you go with me." I looked into its lightning eyes and smiled. "No," I said, and stabbed my silver knife into its chest. The Alpha's roar shook the hill. Lightning struck one last time, hitting both of us. Pain exploded through my body. I felt the Alpha's claws tear into my shoulder as it was pulled into the storm door. The other creatures followed, howling as they were sucked away. The last thing I saw was the Alpha's face, twisting in fury as it disappeared into the darkness. Then everything went quiet. I lay on the wet grass, my shoulder burning where the Alpha's claws had marked me. The storm was gone. The notebook had stopped glowing. My radio came to life. Sarah's voice. "They're gone. All of them. Just disappeared." I looked at the remaining elder. He was tired but smiling. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said. But something told me it wasn't over. Not really. Because as I stood up, learning to ignore the pain of my new scars, I heard one last sound on the wind. The Alpha's voice, distant now. 50 years. We had won, but in 50 years they would try again, and next time I would be ready. The town took a long time to heal. We told the newspapers it was a pack of wild wolves, driven crazy by a rare disease. Most people believed it, or at least pretended to. It's easier that way. The claw marks on my shoulder never fully healed. They burn whenever a storm comes, and sometimes I catch them glowing faintly in the dark. Elder Joseph says they're a reminder, a connection to the other world that I'll carry forever. Sarah stayed on as a ranger, but things changed. Now she carries a pouch of herbs with her radio, and she's learning the old language. Bob retired, moved to Florida. I don't blame him. The community center got rebuilt. Nobody talks about what happened there that night, but they added silver to the window frames, just in case. I visit the tribal grounds every full moon checking for signs. The hole we opened that night left a mark, a circle where nothing grows. Sometimes when the moon is dark, I hear whispers there like distant thunder. 3 months after it happened, I got a letter from Jake Martinez's widow. She found something in his ranger jacket, a photo of strange tracks, half wolf, half human. On the back he'd written, "Mike will know what to do." I keep that photo in my grandfather's notebook now, along with my own notes. 50 years isn't that long. The next generation needs to be ready. Last week I was training some new rangers when a storm rolled in out of nowhere. The recruits got nervous, they'd heard stories, but I just smiled and showed them how to mix the herbs, how to draw the protection circles. "Why do we need to know this?" one of them asked. "Those were just stories, right?" I looked at the storm. Clouds, remembering the Alpha's last words. My scars tingled. "Let me tell you about the moon hunters," I said, opening my grandfather's notebook, "and why we need to be ready when they return, because they will return. The dark spaces between worlds are still there, and somewhere in them, the Alpha is waiting, planning, growing stronger. But next time, we'll be ready. I still patrol Yellowstone every day. The regular wolves don't come near me anymore. They can smell the mark the Alpha left, but that's okay. I have new ways of tracking now, new ways of protecting the park. Sometimes, on dark nights when the wind carries that electric smell, I stand on my cabin porch and look toward Eagle Hill, and sometimes, just sometimes, I see eyes glowing in the darkness, watching, waiting. 50 years. The clock is ticking, and somewhere in the shadows between worlds, the moon hunters are getting ready for the next hunt, but so am I. I never thought the trees could scream until that stormy night in Redwood National Park. My name is Robert Sullivan, and after 30 years as a ranger here, I thought I knew every sound these ancient forests could make. I was wrong. It started 3 months ago, on my 51st birthday. Most people would have been home celebrating, but for me, being alone among these towering giants was the best gift I could ask for. Ever since Sarah, my wife, passed away 12 years ago, the forest has been my true home. Sure, I have my daughter, Jenny. She calls every Sunday from college. But out here, among these 1,000-year-old redwoods, is where I feel most alive. That morning, I grabbed my old camera, the same one I've used to document changes in the forest for the past 20 years, and headed out on my usual patrol. The autumn air was crisp, and fog wrapped around the massive tree trunks like ghostly fingers. I've always loved how peaceful it is here. Just the soft crunch of leaves under my boots and the occasional call of a Steller's jay. But something felt different that day. The birds were quieter than usual. The air felt heavy, like right before a big storm. As I walked my route, checking the markers and making sure no idiots had carved their initials into the ancient bark, I kept getting this weird feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. Now, I should probably mention something I've never told anyone except Sarah. I've always been fascinated by the stories of strange creatures in these woods. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call them. Most rangers would laugh if you brought it up, but I've kept a secret folder of unexplained footprints and weird occurrences I've found over the years. Sarah used to tease me about it, calling it my monster scrapbook, but she never made me feel crazy for believing there might be things in these woods. that science hasn't explained yet. I was taking pictures of a particularly massive redwood when the first rumble came. At first, I thought it was thunder, but the sky was clear where I could see it through the canopy. Then the ground shook, just a little tremor, nothing us Californians aren't used to. But what happened next made my blood run cold. The construction crew working on that new eco-resort. If you ask me, there's nothing eco about cutting down ancient trees for tourist cabins. Started shouting. I couldn't make out the words, but they sounded scared. By the time I got there, a crowd had gathered around something on the ground where they'd been clearing land. There, exposed by their machinery, was a rock face covered in the most incredible petroglyphs I'd ever seen. But these weren't like the usual Native American rock art I'd studied in my ranger training. These were different. The figures were huge, stretching 15 feet up the newly exposed cliff face, and they seemed to show something that made my heart race. Massive, hairy figures walking among the trees, their hands raised to the sky while the earth split open beneath them. Little did I know then, but those ancient drawings were the first warning of something that would change my life forever, and make me question everything I thought I knew about these woods I call home. What happened next would prove that sometimes the craziest stories, the ones that sound like campfire tales meant to scare kids, those turn out to be the ones we should have believed all along. The construction company gave us all kinds of trouble after we found those drawings. Their boss, Mr. Wilson, kept saying they couldn't stop work just because of some old cave paintings. But I knew these weren't just any paintings. The way they seemed to glow in my camera flash, how the eyes of those giant figures seemed to follow you. Something wasn't right. I started noticing strange things during my night patrols. The first time, I almost didn't believe my own eyes. I was checking the trail near Thompson Creek when my flashlight caught something that made me stop dead in my tracks. A young redwood, probably about 30 feet tall, was bent completely sideways, its trunk twisted like a pretzel. Now, I've seen trees grow in weird shapes before. Wind and weather can do funny things. But this was different. The bark wasn't damaged or stretched like it would be if this had happened naturally. It was like someone, or something, had just reached down and twisted it like a bendy straw. I took pictures, of course, but when I came back the next morning with the park biologist, the tree was standing straight again. No twist, no bend, not even a mark on the bark. If I hadn't had those photos on my camera, I would have thought I'd imagined the whole thing. Then the construction workers started disappearing. Not all at once. That would have brought the FBI running. But every few days, someone wouldn't show up for their shift. The official story was that they'd quit, scared off by the protesters who kept showing up at the site. But I talked to Jimmy, one of the security guards, and he told me something that kept me up at night. "Those guys didn't quit, Rob," he whispered to me one evening, glancing nervously at the trees around us. "Tom. You remember Tom, the bulldozer operator? Night before he vanished, he radioed in about hearing voices, said it sounded like crying, but not human crying. Like the trees themselves were weeping. We all thought he was losing it, you know. But then the next morning, his bulldozer was there, engine still running, with his coffee cup still warm on the seat. But no Tom. The earthquake started small, tiny tremors that wouldn't even knock a picture off the wall. But they kept coming, always centered around the construction site, which made no sense. I've studied every geological survey of this area. There shouldn't be any seismic activity here at all. The park geologist was stumped too. One night I stayed late at the petroglyph site, trying to copy down some of the symbols with my flashlight. The air felt heavy, like right before a storm, and the hair on the back of my neck kept standing up. That's when I heard it. A sound I'll never forget as long as I live. It started as a low moan, so deep I felt it in my chest before I heard it with my ears. Then it grew, rising into something between a whale's song and the creaking of an old tree in the wind. But it was coming from everywhere at once, like the whole forest was singing. My flashlight flickered, then went dead, leaving me in complete darkness. That's when the ground started to shake. Not like the little tremors we'd been having. This was different. The earth under my feet felt alive, like it was breathing. And, in the pitch black, I swear I could see the petroglyphs beginning to glow with a faint greenish light. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I ran. But as I stumbled through the dark forest, my heart pounding in my ears, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't running away from something. I was running toward it, toward a truth that had been waiting in these woods for longer than anyone could imagine. And somewhere in the darkness behind me, I heard something moving through the trees, something big, something that wasn't supposed to exist. I spent the next week barely sleeping, studying those petroglyphs every chance I got. My daughter Jenny called on Sunday like always, and I could tell she was worried about me. "Dad, you sound tired," she said. "Maybe you should take some time off." But I couldn't stop. Not when I was starting to understand what the ancient drawings were trying to tell us. I'd been taking rubbings of the symbols and comparing them to every Native American language I could find in our park archives. Most of it was unlike anything I'd ever seen, but some symbols kept showing up over and over. A spiral that looked like the ground breaking open, tall figures with long arms, and trees that seemed to dance. But the really strange stuff started happening when I began photographing the petroglyphs at different times of day. In the morning light, they looked normal, just carvings in rock. But as the sun set, they changed. Through my camera lens, I could see patterns that weren't visible to the naked eye. The figures seemed to move in the shadows, telling a story I was only beginning to understand. The story showed people, normal-sized people, living in harmony with giant creatures who could control the forest. Not like fairy tales or magic, but more like they could talk to the trees, make them grow or move just by thinking about it. The same way you and I can move our arms or legs, these beings could make the earth itself respond to their wishes. I started keeping a journal of all the weird things happening in the park. It wasn't just the earthquakes anymore. Rangers reported trails changing overnight, paths that had been there for decades suddenly gone, with full-grown trees standing where there had been clear ground the day before. Animals were acting strange, too. The deer, usually calm around humans, would freeze and stare into the forest like they saw something we couldn't, then bolt away in terror. One morning I found footprints near the construction site. Big ones, way bigger than any human foot. I'd seen supposed big footprints before in my research, but these were different. They were perfectly preserved in the mud, showing details I'd never seen. 5 toes, just like us, but with strange markings on the sole that matched some of the symbols from the petroglyphs. I made a plaster cast before they could disappear, but something weird happened while I was working. My head started buzzing, like when you stand up too fast and get dizzy. Then I started hearing something. Not exactly voices, but feelings, sadness, anger, fear. They flooded my mind like someone else's memories. The construction crews were getting spooked too. Their equipment kept breaking down in ways that made no sense. Brand new batteries would die instantly. Engines would stop working, then start again perfectly fine the next day. The ground they were trying to clear would be solid one day, then turn into thick mud overnight, even when there hadn't been any rain. But it was what happened to Mike, my fellow ranger, that really shook me up. We were checking out reports of strange noises near the old growth section when he stopped suddenly. "Rob," he whispered, "do you see that?" I looked where he was pointing, and my mouth went dry. About 50 yards ahead, a massive redwood, one we'd walked past 100 times before, was slowly turning, not swaying in the wind, but actually rotating in the ground, its huge roots lifting and shifting like giant fingers. We both stood there, frozen, watching this impossible thing happen. Then Mike raised his camera to take a picture, and everything went crazy. The trees stopped moving. The forest went completely silent, and that buzzing in my head came back, stronger than ever, with one clear message: no. Mike dropped his camera and grabbed his head like he was in pain. When he looked at me, his eyes were wide with fear. Did you hear that?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "I think," I said carefully, "they're trying to tell us something." "They?" Mike's voice shook. "Who's they?" Before I could answer, a deep rumble shook the ground under our feet. But this time, I knew it wasn't an earthquake. It was a warning. Whatever lived in these woods, whatever had been here long before us, was done hiding. And I had a terrible feeling we were about to find out exactly what the petroglyphs had been warning us about all this time. I'll never forget the night I first saw them. It was just after sunset, and I was heading back to my truck after checking on some equipment near the construction site. The air felt strange, heavy and thick like being underwater. That buzzing in my head was back, stronger than ever. Then I heard branches breaking, not like when a deer moves through the forest, but like something big was coming. Really big. I should have been scared. I should have run. But that weird feeling in my head was telling me to stay put, to watch, to understand. They came out of the shadows like they were made of darkness themselves. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. They were so tall, at least 9 feet, maybe more. Their fur was a deep reddish brown, almost the same color as redwood bark, and their eyes glowed with a soft greenish light, just like the petroglyphs had in the dark. There were 5 of them, 2 big ones and 3 smaller ones, like parents with their kids. They moved together, careful and quiet despite their size. The way they watched out for each other, how the bigger ones kept the little ones close. It reminded me of taking Jenny hiking when she was small. I stood there, barely breathing, my camera forgotten in my hands. The buzzing in my head changed, becoming clearer, like static on a radio turning into music. And then I heard them, not with my ears, but in my mind. They weren't talking with words exactly. It was more like feelings and pictures. They showed me memories of the forest from hundreds of years ago, when the trees grew undisturbed and humans were few. They showed me their home, deep underground in caves marked with the same symbols I'd been studying. They showed me how they could speak to the trees, how they could feel the earth's heartbeat and make it move to their will. But mostly, they showed me their fear. Fear of the machines tearing up their home. Fear of the humans who wouldn't listen to the forest's warnings. Fear that soon there would be nowhere left for them to hide. The smallest one, probably just a child, took a step toward me. Its parent made a soft grunt but didn't stop it. The little one's mind touched mine, and suddenly I was flooded with curiosity. It wanted to know about my camera, about the metal things humans wore, about why some of us tried to protect the forest while others tried to destroy it. I found myself thinking back to it, showing it memories of my own. My years protecting the park, teaching visitors about the trees, the joy of watching a young redwood grow taller year after year. The little one made a sound almost like a laugh. That's when I noticed something incredible. Where they stood, the plants were moving. Ferns uncurled toward them like pets wanting to be petted. Small saplings bent and swayed even though there wasn't any wind. Even the ground itself seemed different. Softer, more alive somehow. The bigger, well, I thought of it as the father, stepped forward then. In my mind, I saw images of an ancient burial ground deep in the park. The same place where the construction company wanted to build their resort. I understood then. They weren't just protecting their home. They were protecting something sacred, something that had been there for thousands of years. The father reached out one massive hand and touched a nearby redwood. The trunk split open like a door, revealing a hollow space inside big enough for all of them to fit. Before they disappeared. Into it, the mother turned to look at me one last time. The message in my head was clear as day. Help us, please. The tree trunk sealed behind them like it had never been open. I stood there for a long time, my legs shaking, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Part of me wanted to convince myself it had been a dream or hallucination, but I could still feel them in my head, faint now like a song playing far away, but definitely real. I looked down at my camera and realized I'd been taking pictures the whole time without even thinking about it. My hands trembled as I checked the display. Most of the shots were too dark or blurry, but one was perfect. It showed all 5 of them, clear as day, with those glowing eyes and gentle faces that looked nothing like the scary monsters from campfire stories. I knew right then I had a choice to make. I could show these photos to the world, prove once and for all that Bigfoot was real. My name would be famous, but that would bring more people, more cameras, more destruction, or I could keep their secret and find another way to help them. Even as I thought about it, I felt their approval in my mind. They had chosen to show themselves to me for a reason. They trusted me to do the right thing. What I didn't know then was just how much that trust would cost, and how much I would have to sacrifice to keep it. I'll never forget the night I first saw them. It was just after sunset, and I was heading back to my truck after checking on some equipment near the construction site. The air felt strange, heavy and thick, like being underwater. That buzzing in my head was back, stronger than ever. Then, I heard branches breaking. Not like when a deer moves through the forest, but like something big was coming. Really big. I should have been scared, I should have run. But that weird feeling in my head was telling me to stay put, to watch, to understand. They came out of the shadows like they were made of darkness themselves. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. They were so tall, at least 9 feet, maybe more. Their fur was a deep reddish brown, almost the same color as redwood bark. And their eyes glowed with a soft greenish light, just like the petroglyphs had in the dark. There were 5 of them, 2 big ones and 3 smaller ones, like parents with their kids. They moved together, careful and quiet despite their size. The way they watched out for each other, how the bigger ones kept the little ones close. It reminded me of taking Jenny hiking when she was small. I stood there barely breathing, my camera forgotten in my hands. The buzzing in my head changed, becoming clearer, like static on a radio turning into music. And then I heard them, not with my ears, but in my mind. They weren't talking with words exactly. It was more like feelings and pictures. They showed me memories of the forest from hundreds of years ago, when the trees grew undisturbed and humans were few. They showed me their home, deep underground in caves marked with the same symbols I'd been studying. They showed me how they could speak to the trees, how they could feel the earth's heartbeat and make it move to their will. But mostly, they showed me their fear. Fear of the machines tearing up their home. Fear of the humans who wouldn't listen to the forest's warnings. Fear that soon there would be nowhere left for them to hide. The smallest one, probably just a child, took a step toward me. Its parent made a soft grunt but didn't stop it. The little one's mind touched mine, and suddenly I was flooded with curiosity. It wanted to know about my camera, about the metal things humans wore, about why some of us tried to protect the forest while others tried to destroy it. I found myself thinking back to it, showing it memories of my own, my years protecting the park, teaching visitors about the trees, the joy of watching a young redwood grow taller year after year. The little one made a sound almost like a laugh. That's when I noticed something incredible. Where they stood, the plants were moving. Ferns uncurled toward them like pets wanting to be petted. Small saplings bent and swayed even though there wasn't any wind. Even the ground itself seemed different, softer, more alive somehow. The bigger one, I thought of it as the father, stepped forward then. In my mind, I saw images of an ancient burial ground deep in the park, the same place where the construction company wanted to build their resort. I understood then, they weren't just protecting their home, they were protecting something sacred, something that had been there for thousands of years. The father reached out one massive hand and touched a nearby redwood. The trunk split open like a door, revealing a hollow space inside big enough for all of them to fit. Before they disappeared into it, the mother turned to look at me one last time. The message in my head was clear as day. Help us, please. The tree trunk sealed behind them like it had never been open. I stood there for a long time, my legs shaking, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Part of me wanted to convince myself it had been a dream or hallucination, but I could still feel them in my head. Faint now, like a song playing far away, but definitely real. I looked down at my camera and realized I'd been taking pictures the whole time, without even thinking about it. My hands trembled as I checked the display. Most of the shots were too dark or blurry, but one was perfect. It showed all 5 of them clear as day, with those glowing eyes and gentle faces that looked nothing like the scary monsters from campfire stories. I knew right then I had a choice to make. I could show these photos to the world, prove once and for all that Bigfoot was real. My name would be famous, but that would bring more people, more cameras, more destruction. Or I could keep their secret and find another way to help them. Even as I thought about it, I felt their approval in my mind. They had chosen to show themselves to me for a reason. They trusted me to do the right thing. What I didn't know then was just how much that trust would cost, and how much I would have to sacrifice to keep it. I'll never forget the night I first saw them. It was just after sunset, and I was heading back to my truck after checking on some equipment near the construction site. The air felt strange, heavy and thick, like being underwater. That buzzing in my head was back, stronger than ever. Then I heard branches breaking, not like when a deer moves through the forest, but like something big was coming. Really big. I should have been scared. I should have run. But that weird feeling in my head was telling me to stay put, to watch, to understand. They came out of the shadows like they were made of darkness themselves. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. They were so tall, at least 9 feet, maybe more. Their fur was a deep reddish brown, almost the same color as redwood bark. And their eyes glowed with a soft greenish light, just like the petroglyphs had in the dark. There were 5 of them, 2 big ones and 3 smaller ones, like parents with their kids. They moved together, careful and quiet, despite their size. The way they watched out for each other, how the bigger ones kept the little ones close. It reminded me of taking Jenny hiking when she was small. I stood there, barely breathing, my camera forgotten in my hands. The buzzing in my head changed, becoming clearer, like static on a radio turning into music. And then I heard them, not with my ears, but in my mind. They weren't talking with words exactly. It was more like feelings and pictures. They showed me memories of the forest from hundreds of years ago, when the trees grew undisturbed and humans were few. They showed me their home, deep underground in caves marked with the same symbols I'd been studying. They showed me how they could speak to the trees, how they could feel the earth's heartbeat and make it move to their will. But mostly they showed me their fear. Fear of the machines tearing up their home. Fear of the humans who wouldn't listen to the forest's warnings. Fear that soon there would be nowhere left for them to hide. The smallest one, probably just a child, took a step toward me. Its parent made a soft grunt, but didn't stop it. The little one's mind touched mine, and suddenly I was flooded with curiosity. It wanted to know about my camera, about the metal things humans wore, about why some of us tried to protect the forest while others tried to destroy it. I found myself thinking back to it, showing it memories of my own. My years protecting the park, teaching visitors about the trees, the joy of watching a young redwood grow taller year after year. The little one made a sound almost like a laugh. That's when I noticed something incredible. Where they stood, the plants were moving. Ferns uncurled toward them like pets wanting to be petted. Small saplings bent and swayed even though there wasn't any wind. Even the ground itself seemed different, softer, more alive somehow. The bigger one, I thought of it as the father, stepped forward then. In my mind, I saw images of an ancient burial ground deep in the park, the same place where the construction company wanted to build their resort. I understood then, they weren't just protecting their home. They were protecting something sacred, something that had been there for thousands of years. The father reached out one massive hand and touched a nearby redwood. The trunk split open like a door, revealing a hollow space inside big enough for all of them to fit. Before they disappeared into it, the mother turned to look at me one last time. The message in my head was clear as day. Help us, please. The tree trunk sealed behind them like it had never been open. I stood there for a long time, my legs shaking, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Part of me wanted to convince myself it had been a dream or hallucination, but I could still feel them in my head, faint now, like a song playing far away, but definitely real. I looked down at my camera and realized I'd been taking pictures the whole time without even thinking about it. My hands trembled as I checked. The display. Most of the shots were too dark or blurry, but one was perfect. It showed all 5 of them, clear as day, with those glowing eyes and gentle faces that looked nothing like the scary monsters from campfire stories. I knew right then I had a choice to make. I could show these photos to the world, prove once and for all that Bigfoot was real. My name would be famous, but that would bring more people, more cameras, more destruction. Or I could keep their secret and find another way to help them. Even as I thought about it, I felt their approval in my mind. They had chosen to show themselves to me for a reason. They trusted me to do the right thing. What I didn't know then was just how much that trust would cost, and how much I would have to sacrifice to keep it. Looking back, I wish I'd told Mike everything that night. Maybe if I had, things would have turned out different. Maybe he'd still be alive. It happened 3 days after I met the Bigfoot family. The construction company had brought in more machines, bigger ones this time. They were determined to clear the land before winter set in. Mike and I were on night patrol, checking reports of strange noises near the construction site. "I don't like this, Rob," Mike said as we walked through the dark forest. "Something feels wrong." He was right. The buzzing in my head was back, but different this time. Not curious or cautious like before. Now it felt like anger, like rage. We heard the machines before we saw them. Someone had left them running, their headlights cutting through the darkness. The air felt thick and heavy, like right before a lightning storm. That's when we saw the first tree move. It wasn't like before, with the slow, gentle movement I'd seen with the Bigfoot family. This was violent. The ground cracked open, and roots burst out like giant snakes. They whipped through the air, smashing into the machines, crushing metal like it was made of paper. "Run!" I yelled at Mike, but he was frozen, staring at something behind me. I turned and saw them. Not the family I'd met, but others. Bigger ones. Their eyes weren't gentle green now, but blazing red with fury. They stood in the shadows, directing the roots like conductors leading an orchestra of destruction. Everything happened so fast after that. Mike raised his camera, just like before. But this time the response was immediate and terrible. A root thicker than my body shot out of the ground. I jumped left. Mike went right. I heard him scream. When I got to him, it was too late. The root had... I can't even write it down. I held his hand as he took his last breath, promising I'd tell his wife and kids he loved them. The creatures watched from the darkness, their anger now mixed with what felt like sadness in my head. I reported it as an accident, of course. What else could I say? That ancient forest beings had killed him? That trees had come alive? They ruled it as an equipment malfunction, a tragic accident caused by poorly secured machinery. Mike's family got a settlement from the construction company. It didn't make anything better. After that night, something changed in me. The buzzing in my head never really went away. I started feeling what the forest felt all the time. When the construction crews cut down a tree, I felt its pain like it was my own. When the morning dew settled on the leaves, I felt the tree's quiet joy. When birds made nests in high branches, I sensed the forest's gentle happiness. More construction. Workers quit. The ones who stayed looked scared all the time. Mr. Wilson, the construction boss, brought in armed security guards. They carried big guns and tried to look tough, but I could feel their fear too. The forest could smell it on them. I tried calling Jenny, thinking maybe I should tell her everything. But what would I say? That her dad could talk to trees now? That I was becoming something that wasn't quite human anymore? Instead, I told her I was fine, just busy with work. She didn't believe me. She's too smart for that, but she didn't push. One night I went back to where I'd first met the Bigfoot family. They were waiting for me. The little ones stayed back this time, but the parents approached. In my mind, they showed me what would happen if the construction didn't stop. The sacred burial ground destroyed, the ancient balance broken, more deaths. Not just workers this time. innocent people caught in the backlash of forces they didn't understand. I want to help, I thought to them, but I don't know how. The father's eyes glowed softly. In my head, images flowed. Me learning to use their powers. Me becoming a bridge between their world and mine. Me helping them protect the forest. But there was a price. There's always a price. The mother showed me the last part. If I accepted, this role I could never leave. Never live a normal life again. Never be fully human again. I thought about Mike, about his family, about Jenny, who might not understand why her dad had changed so much. About all the people who could get hurt if I didn't do something. The creatures waited patiently for my answer. In the darkness around us, the trees whispered their ancient secrets. And I knew whatever I decided next would change everything forever. The construction company wasn't giving up. If anything, Mike's death made them more determined. Mr. Wilson brought in twice as many workers and 3 times as many security guards. They worked during the day now, when the forest's power was weaker. I watched them from my patrol truck, feeling sick to my stomach. Every chainsaw bite into a tree sent sharp pains through my head. The forest's anger pressed against my mind like a storm about to break. "Just doing my job, Sullivan," Mr. Wilson told me one morning when I tried to talk to him again. "We've got all the permits. We've jumped through every hoop. If you've got proof of anything illegal, show it. Otherwise, stay out of our way." He tapped the gun his security guards now carried. "Shame about your friend Mike. Accidents happen when people stick their noses where they don't belong." It wasn't a threat, not exactly. But I got the message. So did the forest. That night, the trees near the construction site started dying. Not from being cut down, but from the inside out. Their leaves turned brown and fell off. Their bark cracked and peeled away. By morning, they looked like they'd been dead for years. The company's environmental expert came out to investigate. "Some kind of fungus," she said. But I could see she didn't believe it. How could a fungus kill dozens of trees overnight? The construction crews had to stop work while they tested for contamination. That's when Jenny showed up without warning. My daughter had always been too smart for her own good. "Dad, what's really going on?" she asked, sitting across from me at my kitchen table. "Your voice sounds different on the phone. You look changed." She reached out and touched my hand. "And why do you feel so warm? Are you sick?" I wanted to tell her everything, about the creatures, about how I could feel the forest's pain, about how I wasn't quite human anymore. But I remembered what happened to Mike. I couldn't put my daughter in danger. "Just stressed about the construction," I said. "They're destroying something precious, Jenny. Something that can't be replaced." She squeezed my hand. "Then fight them, Dad, the right way. With lawyers and protests and media attention. Whatever's going on, don't do anything stupid, okay?" Promised her I wouldn't. It was the first time I'd ever lied to my daughter. That night, the Bigfoot family came to me again. But this time was different. The little ones stayed close to their parents, their eyes wide with fear. In my mind, I saw new images, more of their kind arriving from other forests, ancient ones, powerful ones coming to protect the burial ground. They showed me what would happen, a war between their world and ours. People would die, lots of people. There has to be another way, I thought to them. The father's eyes glowed softly. He showed me a different vision, me, standing between their world and ours, a guardian who could speak to both sides. But it would take more power than I had. They would have to change me more, make me more like them. And once they did, there would be no going back. I thought about what Jenny said, about fighting the right way. But I'd tried that. We all had. The company had too much money, too many lawyers. They'd bury any evidence, silence any protest, crush any legal challenge. Something wet hit my hand. I looked up at the sky, but it wasn't raining. I was crying. The mother creature reached out one huge hand and gently touched my face. In my mind, I felt her sorrow, her understanding. They didn't want violence either, but they would protect their sacred ground, no matter the cost. The next morning, I walked into the construction site. My whole body felt hot, like I was burning, up with fever. The forest's power hummed through my veins. Mr. Wilson saw me coming and smiled that smug smile of his. "Last warning," I said, my voice rougher than it used to be. "Stop the construction. Leave this place." He laughed. "Or what? Sullivan, you'll call your tree hugger friends? File another complaint?" Behind him, I saw the security guards reaching for their guns. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I could feel the forest gathering its strength around me, feel the earth stirring beneath my feet. And somewhere in the shadows of the trees, I knew the creatures were watching, waiting for my signal. "No," I said quietly, "or I'll show you exactly what these woods can do." Everything happened so fast after that. One of the security guards, a young guy who looked barely old enough to drink, got scared and fired his gun. The bullet hit a tree behind me, and that's when the forest decided it had had enough. The ground started shaking, but not like a normal earthquake. This was focused, controlled. Cracks opened up in the earth, surrounding the construction equipment like hungry mouths. The machines started sliding into them, disappearing into the ground with horrible grinding sounds. "What's happening?" Mr. Wilson screamed. His face had gone white as paper. "What are you doing?" But it wasn't me doing it. Not really. I was just the bridge, the connection between two worlds. I could feel the creatures moving through the trees around us, their anger burning in my mind. The trees themselves were waking up, their branches reaching down like giant hands. The workers started running. Some of the security guards tried to shoot at the moving trees, but the bullets just bounced off the bark. I wanted to tell them that guns were useless against something this ancient, this powerful, but there wasn't time. One of the guards, I think it was the one who'd threatened me before, got grabbed by a tree branch. It lifted him up, and for a terrible moment, I thought the forest was going to kill him, but instead it just tossed him into a deep pile of leaves, like a parent putting down a misbehaving child. Mr. Wilson was still standing there, frozen in shock. When he saw the Bigfoot family step out of the shadows, his legs gave out and he fell to his knees. The father creature was in front, his eyes glowing brighter than I'd ever seen them. Behind him came others, dozens of them, emerging from between. The trees like living shadows. "They're real," Wilson whispered. All this time, they were real. The ground cracked open one last time, right in front of him. But this crack was different. Inside we could see bones, hundreds of them, carefully arranged. The ancient burial ground. The sacred place the creatures had been protecting all along. The mother creature stepped forward, and for the first time she spoke not just in my mind, but out loud. Her voice sounded like wind through old trees. "This is our home. Our ancestors rest here. You will leave now." Wilson nodded so fast I thought his head might fall off. Yes, of course, we'll go. Just please don't hurt anyone else." The little ones came forward then, gathering up all the guns that the guards had dropped. With strength that seemed impossible for their size, they crushed each weapon into the useless ball of metal and tossed them into the cracks in the earth. I felt dizzy, burning hot and freezing cold at the same time. The forest's power was running through me like electricity, changing me with every second. My vision blurred, then sharpened until I could see things I'd never noticed before. The life flowing through every tree, the memories stored in every root. The ground trembled one last time and all the cracks sealed themselves up. The machines were gone like they'd never been there. The bones were hidden again, safe under layers of sacred earth. Even the bullet holes in the trees healed over, leaving nothing but smooth bark. When it was over, the construction site looked like wild forest again. Nature had reclaimed it so completely that you couldn't tell humans had ever tried to build there. The workers and guards were gone, running back to their trucks, running away from something they'd never be able to explain. Mr. Wilson was the last to leave. He stopped at the edge of the clearing and turned back to look at me. What are you now, Sullivan?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He could see it in my eyes, which I knew were glowing just like the creature's eyes now. He shuddered and hurried away into the darkness. The forest settled into a satisfied silence. The creatures gathered around me, their huge forms blocking out what little sunlight filtered through the trees. The father reached out and put one massive hand on my shoulder. In my mind, his voice was gentle. "It is done. You are one of us now." I looked down at my hands. They were still human hands, but I could feel the power thrumming through them. The same power that had just erased every trace of human construction from this sacred place. I knew I should be scared. But instead, for the first time since this all began, I felt at peace. The hard part was over, but the real work, protecting this place for generations to come, was just beginning. The construction company packed up and left town a week later. The official story was that they'd found unstable ground that made building impossible. Nobody who was there that night talked about what really happened. Who would believe them anyway? The hardest part was telling Jenny. I couldn't hide it anymore. Not when my eyes glowed green in the dark. Not when plants grew stronger, just from me walking past them. I took her for a walk in the forest to the place where I'd first met the creatures. "Dad," she said, looking at me carefully, "what's happened to you?" Instead of explaining, I showed her. I put my hand on a nearby tree trunk and she watched, in amazement as flowers bloomed all along its branches, even though it was the wrong season for them. Then I called silently into the forest, and the little ones came out to meet her. They remembered her from my memories and were curious about her. Jenny didn't run. She didn't scream. She just watched as they came closer, her eyes wide but unafraid. When the smallest one reached out to touch her hand, she let it. "Oh, Dad," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "This is why you couldn't leave, isn't it?" I nodded. "They needed me. The forest needed me. Can you understand?" She hugged me tight. I always knew there was something magical about these woods. I just didn't know how magical. She pulled back and looked at me seriously. "But what about your job? Your life?" That part was already worked out. The Park Service didn't ask too many questions when I requested a transfer to a remote ranger station deep in the park. They gave me a little cabin near the sacred ground, far from the tourist trails. My job now was to watch over the deepest parts of the forest, the parts most humans never see. These days, I still patrol the woods, but in a different way. I can feel when someone's lost and guide them back to safety by making certain paths look more appealing than others. I know when fires are starting and can help the forest protect itself. I can sense when animals are sick or hurt and help them heal. The creatures, my new family, taught me more every day. How to listen to the earth's heartbeat. How to help trees communicate better with each other. How to keep the balance between the human world and theirs. Jenny visits once a month. She's in graduate school now, studying ecology. Sometimes she brings her friends who work in forest conservation, and while I can't show them everything, I can guide them to make discoveries that help protect the woods. The creatures approve of this. They understand that some humans can be allies. I still feel guilty about Mike sometimes. The creatures do too. They show me in their thought pictures that they never meant for anyone to die. Now we work together to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. Late at night, when the forest is quiet except for the soft humming of ancient power in my mind, I think about the choice I made. I'm not fully human anymore, but I'm not quite like the creatures either. I'm something in between, a bridge between two worlds, a guardian of old magic and new hope. The construction company's guards still tell stories about that night. Probably. No one believes them. But sometimes, on dark nights when the moon is hidden, hikers say they see strange shadows moving through the trees. They say they hear weird sounds, like the forest is singing. They say they feel like something is watching them, protecting them. They're right. I'm still here watching over these woods with my new family. The ancient guardians aren't going anywhere, and as long as I'm alive, neither am I. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I take out my old camera and look at that one clear photo I took of them. I don't need it anymore. I see them every day now, but I keep it to remind me of where this all started, of who I used to be and who I became. And you, know what? I wouldn't change a thing. The day I stopped trusting my own reflection was the same day the fog started taking people. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I do. But after 20 years of rescuing people from these mountains, I've learned that some things just can't be explained. My name is Catherine Mitchell, and I've spent half my life in the Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. These days, I'm the person they call when hikers go missing, and lately a lot of hikers have been going missing. It wasn't always like this. Before I became a search and rescue specialist, I was an Olympic climber. I loved the challenge, the thrill of reaching places most people would never dare to go. My little sister Jenny was my biggest fan. She used to joke that I was part mountain goat. "Katie," she'd say, "I bet you could climb these mountains in your sleep." I wish I had been there the day she went hiking alone. Maybe I could have sensed the danger coming like I do now. That's what losing someone does to you. It changes you. After Jenny's accident, I quit competitive climbing and moved here permanently. I needed to be in these mountains to understand them better, to make sure what happened to Jenny wouldn't happen to anyone else. Over time, I started noticing things, small things at first, how the air feels different just before a storm, how certain parts of the mountains go quiet for no reason, how sometimes the shadows move when they shouldn't. People say I've developed a sixth sense for danger. Maybe they're right. Or maybe I've just learned to pay attention to what the mountains are trying to tell us. But nothing, not my Olympic training, not my years of rescue experience, not even my strange new instincts, could have prepared me for what started happening last month. It began with a normal missing persons call. A group of college students hadn't returned from their weekend hike. Simple enough. I'd done this hundreds of times before, except this time when we found them, they weren't quite right. I remember standing at the rescue station that morning checking my gear one last time. The weather report showed clear skies, but something in my gut told me to pack extra flares in my emergency shelter. I didn't know it then, but that feeling, that tiny whisper of warning, would be the first of many signs I should have paid more attention to. The fog that rolled in that morning wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. It moved wrong, felt wrong, and somewhere in its depths I could have sworn I heard my sister's voice calling my name. That's when everything changed. That's when I learned that sometimes the most dangerous things in these mountains aren't the cliffs, or the weather, or the wildlife. Sometimes the most dangerous thing is thinking you know what's real and what isn't. But I should probably start from the beginning. Because to understand what happened in those mountains, what's still happening, you need to know exactly how it feels when the fog starts playing tricks with your mind. When it starts showing you things that can't possibly be there, or worse, when it starts showing you things that are. That first rescue should have been simple. 4 college students, all experienced hikers, had set up camp near Klingman's Dome. They'd even done everything right, filed their hiking plan, packed proper gear, brought satellite phones, but they hadn't checked in for 2 days. I remember walking into the rescue station that morning, and Mark, my team leader, looking worried. That itself was strange. Mark never looked worried. "Something's off about this one, Katie," he said, handing me the missing persons report. 2 other hikers came in this morning. Say they saw the students yesterday, but he stopped like he wasn't sure how to continue. But what? But they also saw them walking in 2 different places at the same time. I felt that familiar prickle on the back of my neck, the one that usually means trouble's coming. We gathered our team, me, Mark, Sarah, our medical expert, and Tom, our local guide. The morning was clear when we started up the trail, but that changed fast. The fog rolled in like I'd never seen before. Usually, mountain fog comes in slowly, drifting up from the valleys. This was different. It came from everywhere at once. "Check your radios," I called out. Everyone did. They worked fine, but something felt wrong about the static. It almost sounded like whispers. We found the students' campsite first. Everything was exactly where it should be. Tents set up properly, food stored correctly. No signs of animal disturbance. It looked like they had just stepped away for a minute. But their phones were all there. lying on a sleeping bag. All dead, even though they should have had plenty of battery life. That's when Sarah called out, "Guys, you need to see this." She was standing at the edge of the campsite, pointing at footprints in the mud. They led away from the camp in 4 different directions. Each set looked exactly like it came from the same boots the students were wearing. "People don't just split up in 4 directions," Tom said quietly. "Not experienced hikers, not in these mountains." The fog was getting thicker. I could barely see 10 feet ahead. And then I heard it. Someone calling for help. It sounded close. "Hello?" I shouted. "This is search and rescue. Can you hear me?" The voice called again, but this time it came from behind us. The exact same voice, the exact same words. Then again from our left, then our right, Sarah grabbed my arm. "Katie," she whispered, "look at the fog." I did. And I felt my heart stop for a second. The fog wasn't moving with the wind anymore. It was moving against it. Moving like it had a mind of its own. And in it, just for a second, I saw something that looked like a face. That's when our radios all crackled to life at once. Through the static, we heard voices. The missing students. Voices. All talking at once, all saying the same thing. "We found ourselves, we found ourselves, we found ourselves." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my compass. The needle was spinning in circles. "We need to get out of here," I said. "Now." But as we turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Through the fog, about 50 feet away, I saw our rescue team. All 4 of us standing perfectly still, staring back. The problem was I could feel my feet on the ground. I could feel Sarah's hand still gripping my arm. We weren't over there, but they looked exactly like us. Down to the smallest detail. And then they smiled. Mark's voice came out hoarse. "Katie, what do we do?" I've been in a lot of scary situations in these mountains, but nothing had ever prepared me for this, because deep down, I knew we weren't just looking for missing hikers anymore. We were looking for something that could steal your face, your voice, your very identity, and it was watching us through the fog, waiting to see what we'd do next. "We stay together," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "No matter what we see or hear, we stay together. And we need to find those students before..." I couldn't finish the sentence. Before what? Before they weren't themselves anymore? Before they were replaced by whatever was out there in the fog? The copies of us in the fog took a step forward. All at the same time, like they were connected, like they were one thing pretending to be 4 people. That's when I realized this was just the beginning. Whatever was out there in the fog, it wasn't just taking people. It was learning from them. After that first encounter, we managed to get back to the rescue station. None of us talked much on the way down. What could we say? We'd all seen impossible things. The students were found the next morning, walking out of the woods on their own. They seemed fine at first. They remembered getting lost in the fog, then finding their way back. Simple as that. But something wasn't, right? "Look at this," Sarah said, showing me her medical notes a few days later. We were sitting in the rescue station's small office, going through reports. All 4 students give exactly the same story, word for word. That's not normal, Katie. People who go through the same experience still tell it differently. She was right. And that wasn't the only strange thing. Tom had been tracking weather patterns, and he called me over to his computer. "The fog's wrong," he said, pointing at the screen. "Look here. It's moving against the wind every time, and it's appearing in places where fog shouldn't be." I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos I'd taken during the rescue. "There's something else," I said. "Look at the background of this picture." It was a simple shot of our rescue team getting ready. But in the fog behind us, there were shapes, human shapes, more than there should have been. "We need to talk to someone who knows these mountains better than us," I said. "Someone who might know if this has happened before." That's how I found myself sitting in David Whitecloud's living room the next day. He was a Cherokee elder who'd lived in these mountains his whole life. His grandfather had been a medicine man, and David knew all the old stories. "The old ones spoke of them," he said quietly, pouring me tea. The Mistwalkers. They were here, long before us. They protect sacred places, but they're not like us. They don't understand us. They copy what they see, like children playing dress-up. But they don't understand what they're copying. The missing people, I said. The ones who come back different. David nodded slowly. They try to send the people back, but they don't. Always get it right. Like making a copy of a copy, sometimes things get lost. A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the students' blank faces, their word-for-word identical stories. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what David had said, about copies of copies, about things that lived in the mist. I got up to get some water, and that's when I saw it. Fog seeping under my front door. But I live on the 3rd floor of my apartment building. I backed away, but the fog followed. It moved like it was alive, reaching out with thin tendrils. And in its swirling shapes, I saw faces. Dozens of faces. Some I recognized. The missing students, old rescue cases, even my sister Jenny. My phone rang, making me jump. It was Mark. "Katie," he said, his voice shaking. "Something's happening. The fog. It's everywhere. And people are seeing things. They're loved ones, people who died years ago. Katie, they're seeing themselves." I looked back at my living room. The fog had formed into a human shape. My shape. It was like looking in a mirror, except the reflection didn't move when I did. "Mark," I whispered into the phone. "I don't think we're dealing with weather anymore. I think we're dealing with something that's been here all along. Something that's finally decided to notice us." The fog copy of me tilted its head like it was curious, like it was studying me, learning me. "Get everyone to the rescue station," I said. "Call David. We need to know everything about these Mistwalkers, because I think they're not just watching anymore." "What are they doing?" Mark asked. Watched as my fog copy took a step forward, its movements becoming more natural, more me. "They're replacing us," I said, "one by one. And we need to figure out how to stop them before there's no real people left in these mountains at all." The fog copy smiled at me, and somewhere in the distance, I heard what sounded like my own voice, calling my name. The rescue station was packed when I arrived. Every rescue worker in the area had shown up, along with David Whitecloud and several other Cherokee elders. The fog outside pressed against the windows like it was trying to get in. "They're getting bolder," David said, pointing at a map spread across the table. Red pins marked every place people had seen their doubles. The pins formed a circle around, one of the oldest parts of the mountains. That's when the lights went out. In the darkness, someone screamed. I clicked on my flashlight, sweeping it around the room. Everything looked normal, except... "Where's Tom?" Sarah asked. The back door was open, swinging in the wind. Tom's flashlight lay on the ground outside, still on, pointing into the fog. "Nobody move," I said. But it was too late. Half the room was already heading for the door. I couldn't blame them. Tom was one of us. We found him standing in the parking lot, completely still, staring into the fog. When my light hit him, he turned. His face was blank, like someone had wiped away all his features. "Tom?" Mark stepped forward. "You okay, buddy?" Tom's face changed. It was like watching clay reshape itself. In seconds, his features were back, but they weren't quite right. His smile was too wide. His eyes didn't blink. "I'm fine," he said. But his voice came from behind us, too. We spun around. Another Tom stood there. This one looked perfect. Exactly like him. Then another stepped out of the fog, and another. "I'm fine," they all said together. "I found myself." David grabbed my arm. "They're not trying to hurt him," he whispered. "They're trying to understand him, like children learning to write by copying letters." The first Tom, the one with the wrong face, stepped toward us. "You're all so interesting," he said. But it wasn't Tom's voice anymore. It was like many voices speaking together. So many memories, so many feelings. We want to understand. The fog around us took shape. I saw myself step out of it. Then Sarah, then Mark. Perfect copies, all staring at us with that same curious look. "Stop this," I said. Where's the real Tom? My copy tilted its head. Real? What makes him real? The memories? We have those now. The feelings? We have those, too. The fog thickened and more shapes stepped out. My sister Jenny, my parents, people I'd rescued years ago. Your kind forgets, all the copies said together. You lose pieces of yourselves every day. We keep everything, every memory, every feeling. We are better at being you than you are. That's when I noticed something. Where my flashlight beam hit them, the copies' edges seemed less solid, like they were having trouble staying together in the light. You're wrong, I said, taking a step forward. We're not just memories and feelings. We're not copies. I was shining my light directly at my copy now. It stepped back, its edges wavering. We're alive. I clicked on my rescue flare. Bright red light flooded the parking lot. The copies scattered like smoke, their faces melting away. All except the first Tom, who stood his ground. We were here first, it said in that many-voiced way. This is our place, our mountains. You don't belong here. No, David said firmly. These mountains belong to everyone, to everything, even you. But you can't take people. You can't take their lives. The thing that looked like Tom stared at us for a long moment. Then it smiled, a real smile this time, not the too wide copy of one. Perhaps, it said, perhaps we could learn together. Before we could answer, it dissolved into fog. The real Tom was found an hour later, asleep in his truck, with no memory of what had happened. But something had changed. The fog beings had revealed themselves. They'd talked to us, and now we knew they weren't just mindless copies. They were something ancient, something curious, something that wanted to understand us. And that might be even more dangerous than if they just wanted to hurt us. Because how do you stop something that can become anyone? How do you fight an enemy that knows your every thought, your every memory, the moment it touches you? I looked at the fog still swirling around us, and I knew this was just the beginning. The real battle hadn't even started yet, and somewhere, in that fog, wearing our faces, the Mistwalkers were watching, learning, waiting. The next few days were the hardest of my life. The fog was everywhere now, and you couldn't trust what you saw anymore, or who you saw. It started with small things. Sarah noticed her coffee cup was on the wrong side of her desk, even though she was sure she'd left it somewhere else. Mark found his car keys in his left pocket when he always kept them in his right. Little things. Things you could almost convince yourself you were imagining. But then it got worse. I was reviewing rescue footage when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. In one clip, Mark was wearing his watch on his left wrist. In the next clip, taken just 2 minutes, later it was on his right. We need to check everyone, I told Sarah quietly. But we can't let them know we're checking. We came up with a system. Little questions about memories only the real person would know. Quick tests with flashlights when nobody was looking. The copies still couldn't handle bright light well, but it wasn't perfect. The Mistwalkers were learning, getting better at being us. One morning I walked into the rescue station and found myself already there. It, was sitting at my desk, doing my paperwork. Everything about her was perfect. The way I held my pen, how I always tucked my hair behind my left ear when concentrating. She even had the small scar on my right hand from my first climbing accident. "Hello, Catherine," she said, using my voice perfectly. "I was wondering when you'd show up." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my flashlight. "You're not me," she smiled. My smile, exactly how I smile. "Are you sure? I have all your memories. I know everything you know. I remember how Jenny used to braid your hair before climbing competitions. I remember the exact sound of her laugh. Stop. I whispered. I remember how you felt when you found out about her accident. How you couldn't climb for months after. How you still blame yourself. Those aren't your memories," I said, my voice getting stronger. "You just copied them, like copying words from a book. It doesn't make them yours." She stood up. "The way I stand up, the exact same movement. But what makes a memory real, Catherine? What makes a person real? Is it their thoughts, their feelings, their past? I have all of those now. That's when Sarah walked in. She stopped in the doorway looking between us. "Sarah," I said quickly, "it's me. I'm the real Catherine." "No," my copy said, "I'm the real Catherine." Sarah pulled out her flashlight, shining it at both of us. Neither of us flinched. The Mistwalkers had learned to handle light better. "Ask us something," I said. "Something only the real Catherine would know." Sarah thought for a moment. "What did you say to me after my first failed rescue, when we lost that hiker in the storm?" "I said it wasn't your fault," my copy answered immediately. "That sometimes the mountains make their own choices." She was right. That's exactly what I'd said. "I also said," I added, remembering something else, "that you needed to forgive yourself, and then I told you about Jenny, about how guilt can eat you alive if you let it." Sarah looked between us again. "Catherine told me about Jenny 2 months after that conversation. Not the same day." My copy's smile flickered just for a second. Then she melted into fog, swirling away through the crack under the door. I sank into my chair, shaking. "They're getting better," I said. "They almost had everything right." "Almost isn't enough," Sarah said, but I could hear the fear in her voice. "What happens when they get everything right?" I looked at my reflection in the window. For a second, I could have sworn it moved differently than I did. "We need to end this," I said. "Before we can't tell what's real anymore. Before we start doubting ourselves." "How?" Sarah asked. I pulled out the map covered in red pins. "We go to where they're strongest, the place they're protecting, and we make them understand they can't have our lives. And if they don't listen," I touched the scar on my hand, my real scar with real memories behind it, "then we show them that real people, real memories, real feelings, they're stronger than any copy." But as I said it, I caught my reflection, moving wrong again, and this time I was sure of it. The war for who we were had begun, and losing meant losing everything, our lives, our identities, maybe even our souls. The fog was coming for all of us now, and somewhere in it, wearing our faces, the Mistwalkers were getting ready for their final move. We headed into the mountains at dawn, me, Sarah, Mark, and David Whitecloud. Tom stayed behind to coordinate from the rescue station. Each of us carried powerful flashlights, emergency flares, and something personal, something that held real memories. Mine was Jenny's old climbing chalk bag. The fog was waiting for us. It rolled down the mountainside like a living thing, thick and gray, and hungry. In it, shapes moved, familiar shapes. I saw myself walking beside myself, saw 3 marks, 4 Sarahs. The copies weren't even trying to hide anymore. "Stay together," I called out. "No matter what you see or hear, stay together." That's when we heard Tom's voice on the radio. "Guys, I think something's wrong. I'm seeing myself outside." The station. Static filled the radio. When it cleared, Tom's voice came again. But different. "Wrong. I found myself," the voice said. "We all found ourselves." The radio went dead. David touched my arm, pointing ahead. Through the fog, we could see a clearing. Ancient stone markers stood in a circle, covered in Cherokee symbols. This was the place. The sacred ground, the mist. Walkers had been protecting, but getting there wasn't going to be easy. The fog thickened, and suddenly we were surrounded by copies. Dozens of them. All of us. All smiling that same wrong smile. "You don't understand," they said in their many-voiced. "Wait. We're making things better, perfect. No more loss, no more death. We can be everyone, keep everyone, forever." "That's not life," I said. "That's just pretending." One of my copies stepped forward. "Like you pretend you're not afraid? Like you pretend you don't still hear Jenny's voice in your dreams?" The fog swirled, and there she was. Jenny, looking exactly like she did the day she died. "Katie," she said, "don't you want me back? Don't you want to fix your biggest mistake?" My heart felt like it was being torn in half, but I gripped her chalk bag tighter. "You're not her. The real Jenny would never want this." The thing wearing my sister's face snarled. The fog rushed in, thick and choking. I heard Sarah scream, heard Mark shouting. Everything was chaos. I clicked on my flashlight, sweeping it around. The beam caught one of the copies, Mark's, and its face melted away. But there were two, many. They were everywhere. "The stones!" David shouted through the chaos. "Get to the stones!" We fought our way forward, but the copies were learning fast. They dodged our lights now, attacked from the shadows. Sarah went down, tackled by her own double. Mark rushed to help her and disappeared into the fog. I heard their screams, real screams. "No!" I ran toward the sound, but strong hands grabbed. Me, David, pulling me back. "The stones," he said again. "It has to end there." We made it to the circle. The stone markers hummed with something old, something powerful. The fog seemed thinner here. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted into the swirling mist. "Why take our lives?" The fog gathered, forming into a single shape. Looked like everyone, all of us, all our features mixed together. "Because you waste them," it said. "You forget. You lose. You die. We can save everything. Keep everything. But they're not your memories to keep," I said. Then I understood. "That's what this place is, isn't it? This is where you store them, all the memories you've taken?" The being smiled with 1,000 familiar smiles. "For centuries, every person, every memory, safe, perfect." I took Jenny's chalk bag and held it out. "Then take this memory, but take all of it. Not just the happy parts. Take the pain. Take the loss. Take what it really means to be human." I opened the bag. Inside was Jenny's last note to me, the one they found with her body. "Going for one last climb, sis. I want to be brave like you." The fog being reached out, curious. As it touched the note, it shuddered, its faces twisted in pain. "That's what real memories are," I said. "That's what real life is. It hurts, we lose things, people die. But that's what makes the good parts matter. You can't have one without the other." The being staggered back. All around us the copies were starting to fade, their faces showing real emotion for the first time. Confusion, fear, understanding. The being said, its voice changing, becoming more human. "We didn't know. We didn't understand. Let them go," I said. "Let all of them go. And maybe we can learn from each other. The right way." The fog began to clear. In the distance I heard Sarah and Mark calling out, their real voices. The being looked at me with eyes that finally held real understanding. "Your memories," it said softly. "They're stronger than our copies because they're real, all of them, even the ones that hurt." "Yes," I whispered. "That's what makes us human." The fog lifted. The copies vanished. And in the stone circle something changed. The air felt lighter, cleaner. Like a weight had been lifted from the whole mountain. We had won. But more than that, we had helped them understand. And maybe, just maybe, they had helped us understand something too. About what it really means to be real. To be human. To be alive. That was 3 months ago. Things are different now in the Smoky Mountains, but not in ways most people would notice. The fog still comes, of course. These are the Smokies. Fog is part of what makes them special. But now I can tell the difference between regular fog and them. The mist walkers. They're still here, watching, learning, but differently than before. Sometimes when I'm out on a rescue, I'll catch a glimpse of myself in the mist. But it's not trying to replace me anymore. It's more like having a guardian angel. Last week, when I was looking for a lost hiker, a familiar shape in the fog led me right to him. Sarah and Mark recovered from that final battle, though sometimes they still check their reflections a little too carefully. Tom doesn't remember much about what happened to him at the rescue station, and maybe that's for the best. But we all carry something from that day, a deeper understanding of who we are and what makes us real. David helped me set up small markers around the mountains, places where people can leave memories safely, not to be copied or stolen, but to be shared. Sometimes, if you visit these spots in the early morning fog, you might see shapes forming, people from the past, moments in time. But they're not trying to trick anyone now. They're more like memories given shape, stories being told. I still have trouble trusting mirrors sometimes. Every now and then, I'll catch my reflection moving a half second too late, or see a familiar face in a window that shouldn't be there. But I'm not afraid. Anymore, we reached an understanding, the Mistwalkers and us. They protect the mountains in their way, and we protect them in ours. Last night I had a dream about Jenny, but it wasn't like before. She wasn't trying to be real, to come back. She was just there. A memory. A good one. You did good, Katie, she said, smiling her real smile. You showed them what it means to be human. When I woke up, there was fog outside my window, forming shapes that looked almost like a wave goodbye. I keep Jenny's chalk bag on my desk now, not as a reminder of what I lost, but of what I learned. That being human isn't about being perfect. It's not about keeping everything forever. It's about the mix of joy and pain, gain and loss, life and death. That's what the Mistwalkers finally understood. You can't copy life. You can only live it. These days, when people ask me if I believe in ghosts, I just smile. Because how do you explain that sometimes the things we think are haunting us are really just trying to understand us? That sometimes the most human thing you can do is help someone else learn what being human means? The fog is rolling in outside my window as I write this. In it I can see shapes moving, wearing familiar faces. But I'm not worried. They're not here to take anything. They're here to remind me that some memories are meant to be kept, some are meant to be shared, and some are meant to fade away into the fog, making room for new ones. That's what makes them real. That's what makes us real. And somewhere, these ancient mountains, in the swirling mist between what's real and what's remembered, the Mistwalkers are still learning, still watching, still protecting their sacred places. But now they understand. The most sacred thing of all is being truly, perfectly, imperfectly human. I touch the scar on my hand, my real scar with its real history, and smile at my reflection in the window. It smiles back at exactly the same time, usually. The crimson swampy David Rodriguez. The day I first saw the red moss, I should have run. Should have packed up my ranger station, called in sick, and never looked back. But 20 years of protecting the Everglades doesn't just wash away like morning dew. This swamp is in my blood, just like it was in my father's blood and his father's before him. Now I wonder if that's exactly what it wanted. My name is David Rodriguez, and I'm a park ranger at Everglades National Park. At least, I was until 3 months ago. What happened out there in the murky waters changed everything. Changed me. But I need to tell this story even if no one believes it. Someone needs to know the truth about what's hiding in those waters. Let me start at the beginning. I've always been most at home in the swamp. While other kids played video games, I was out learning to track gators with my dad. After high school, I joined the Marines, but the swamp called me back. When my marriage fell apart last year, these wetlands became my escape. Just me, my camera, and the endless maze of mangroves and sawgrass. My little ranger station sits on stilts near the western edge of the park. It's nothing fancy. Just a wooden cabin with a tin roof and a wraparound porch, where I spend my evenings watching the sun sink into the marshland. The walls are covered with my wildlife photos. Everything from rare ghost orchids to Florida panthers. Each picture tells a story, marks a moment when I was exactly where I needed to be. That morning started like any other. I was sitting on my porch, sipping coffee as the mist rose off the water. The air was thick with the usual symphony, gators bellowing, frogs croaking, birds calling back and forth. The swamp is never quiet. That's the first thing you learn out here. My radio crackled to life, breaking the morning peace. Station 7, this is Control. We've got a situation. I grabbed my radio. Go ahead, Control. 3 Boy Scout troops. 42 people total. Reported missing since yesterday evening. Last known location near Gatortooth Creek. My stomach tightened. Gatortooth Creek was deep in the swamp, where the water turns black and the trees grow so thick they block out the sun. Even experienced guides avoid that area. Any contact, I asked, already pulling on my boots. Negative. Search and rescue is mobilizing, but you're closest. Can you do initial recon? On my way, I grabbed my gear, first aid kit, GPS, satellite, phone, and my trusty Canon camera. Something told me I'd need to document whatever I found out there. If only I'd known then what I know now. As I fired up my airboat, the morning sounds suddenly stopped. All of them. Like someone had hit a mute button on the whole swamp. In 20 years, I'd never heard silence like that. That should have been my second warning. But I was too focused on those missing kids to notice that the swamp itself was trying to tell me something. By the time I figured it out, it was already too late. The ride to Gatortooth Creek usually takes 40 minutes, but that morning felt longer. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was worry about those scouts. But something felt wrong. Like the air itself was holding its breath. I found their campsite easily enough. 3 large clearings with flattened grass where tents had stood. Backpacks were scattered everywhere, some half open with trail mix and water bottles spilling out. It looked like they'd left in a hurry, but it was what I saw next that made my skin crawl. A strange red moss covered patches of ground and crept. Nearby trees. Not the usual green Spanish moss we get down here. This stuff was blood red and seemed to pulse slightly, like it had its own heartbeat. In 20 years of working these swamps, I'd never seen anything like it. I pulled out my Dio. Control, this is Station 7. I'm at the campsite. My voice echoed strangely in the unnatural quiet. Go ahead, Station 7. Campsite appears abandoned. Signs of rapid departure, but I hesitated, not sure how to describe what I was seeing. There's some kind of unusual vegetation growth here, red in color. Might want to get environmental. Out here to take a look. I snapped some photos of the moss with my camera. As I moved closer to examine it, something splashed in the water behind me. I spun around, expecting to see a gator. Instead, I saw nothing but ripples on the dark water. That's when I noticed something else odd. Usually, gators would be sunning themselves on the banks this time of morning. But there weren't any. No turtles either, no birds. Just that heavy silence and more splashing sounds that seemed to follow me as I moved around the campsite. I found the first real clue near the water's edge, a scout leader's clipboard with the day's schedule still attached. The last entry read, 8:30 p.m. night hike along marked trail. Below that was a hastily scrawled note that made my blood run cold. Something watching us from trees, red eyes, kids scared, need to move. More splashing behind me, closer this. Time. I turned slowly, my hand moving to the knife on my belt. Through the morning mist, I saw something that didn't make sense. A group of about 6 or 7 gators, all lined up in a perfect V formation, watching me. Gators don't do that. They don't work together, ever. As I watched, more gators silently joined the formation. Their eyes seemed to glow with a faint red tint, the same color as the moss. They moved with purpose, like they were thinking, planning. My radio crackled again. Station 7, search and rescue. Day 20 minutes, any sign of the scouts? I backed away from the water's edge, keeping my eyes on the gators. Negative on the scouts, but we've got unusual wildlife behavior here. Really unusual. I think. The words caught in my throat as I saw more red eyes glowing in the shadows between the trees. I think we're going to need a lot more help. I needed to get back to my airboat, but as I turned to leave, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. A clear boot print in the mud, fresh enough that water was still seeping into it. And beside it, spreading outward like tiny red fingers, was that same pulsing moss. Someone had been here very recently. And wherever they went, that red moss followed. The search teams arrived in waves. First the local rangers, then state police, and finally a group from the Fish and Wildlife Service. By noon, the quiet swamp had turned into a busy command center. But something still felt off. The animals kept their distance, watching us with those strange red eyes. Rodriguez, called Sarah Chen, my fellow ranger from Station 4. Come look, at this. She was kneeling by a clump of that red moss, holding up a scout's backpack. The bag was covered in the stuff, spreading across it like a web. Don't touch it, I warned, but she already had. As we watched, the moss seemed to creep toward her fingers. Sarah yanked her hand back. "It's warm," she said, wiping her hand on her pants. "And it kind of moved on its own." Before I could respond, a shout came from the water's edge. "We found something." We rushed over to where 2 state police officers were pulling something from the water. A waterlogged camera, one of those tough ones kids use, bright yellow and built to survive drops and dunks. The officers handed it to me, knowing I had experience with cameras. It still worked. I pressed the playback button, and we all crowded around to see. The first few photos were normal. Kids setting up tents, making s'mores, typical scout stuff. Then things changed. The photos got darker, shakier. Red eyes reflecting in the darkness. Shapes moving between trees that didn't look quite human or animal. The last photo made my heart stop. It showed something tall standing in the shadows, covered in red-tinted fur. Its face wasn't clear, but those eyes, they glowed like hot coals. "What is that thing?" Sarah whispered. I didn't answer. I was watching the water behind her, where those gators were still lined up, still watching. But now they had been joined by other animals. Raccoons, wild pigs, even a Florida panther. All with those same glowing red eyes, all moving together like they shared one mind. "Everyone back to the boats," I said quietly. "Now." But we haven't. "Finish the search grid," one of the officers started to argue. "Look at the water," I cut him off. "Look at how they're moving." The animals were spreading out, forming a circle around us. Moving with purpose, moving like soldiers. "They're hurting us," Sarah realized. That's when we heard it. A sound that didn't belong in nature. Like 100 voices whispering all at once, but underwater. It came from everywhere and nowhere. "Run!" I shouted, but it was too late. The panther leaped first, not at us, but at our boats. Its claws shredded the rubber pontoons of the nearest airboat. The gators surged forward together, their armored bodies slamming into the other boats, trying to tip them over. "The trees!" I grabbed Sarah's arm. "Get off the ground!" We scrambled up the nearest cypress, its branches slick with that red moss. Below us, chaos erupted. Animals working together in ways they never should. Attacking our equipment, trapping us. Through the chaos, I spotted something moving in the shadows across the water. Something big. Something walking on 2 legs. The same figure from the photo. It stepped into a patch of sunlight, and for the first time, I saw what we were really dealing with. The stories I'd heard as a kid about the skunk ape, Florida's Bigfoot, hadn't prepared me for this. This creature was different. Wrong. Its fur wasn't just red-tinted, it was alive with that same pulsing moss, and when it turned its head to look at me, I saw intelligence in those glowing eyes. Not animal intelligence, something else, something that had plans. My radio crackled weakly in my pocket. Through the static, I heard control trying to reach us. But what could I tell them? That we were being hunted by possessed animals? That some moss-covered monster was controlling them? Sarah's grip tightened on my arm. "David," she whispered, "look at your hands." I looked down. Red moss was creeping up my fingers from where I'd touched the tree branch, and it was spreading. I scraped at the red moss on my hands, but it only spread faster. Below us, 2 of the police officers had made it to another tree, while 3 others were trapped on what was left of an airboat. The animals kept circling, waiting. "Rodriguez," Officer Mike Torres called from the other tree. "Your sat phone still work?" I pulled it out with my clean hand. Dead. Of course it was dead. That's when I noticed something weird about the moss on my fingers. It felt warm, and with each pulse, thoughts that weren't mine flooded my head. I saw flashes of the swamp from different angles, like I was seeing through other eyes. Gator eyes, bird eyes, human eyes. "The scouts," I gasped. I can feel them." Sarah grabbed my sleeve. "What do you mean?" "They're alive, all of them. But I struggled to find the right words. "They're connected somehow, like they're all thinking the same thoughts." The creature, the skunk ape, moved closer to our tree. Up close it was even more terrifying. 8 feet tall at least, its red moss, fur rippling like it was underwater. But its eyes, they looked almost human. It raised one long arm and pointed at something behind us. Against my better judgment, I turned to look. Through the trees, I could see movement. People walking in perfect lines through the swamp. The missing scouts and their leaders. But they moved wrong, like puppets on strings. Red moss covered their clothes, their skin, their hair. Their eyes glowed just like the animals. "Oh God," Sarah whispered. "What are they building?" I hadn't noticed it at first, but she was right. The possessed scouts were gathering materials, branches, vines, mud, and building something. A structure that rose from the dark water like a twisted beehive. The thoughts in my head grew stronger. I could feel what they were feeling. The need to build. The need to spread. The need to become part of something bigger. "It's not just controlling them," I said, fighting against the warm thoughts trying to take over my mind. "It's changing them, making them into something else." "David," Sarah's voice shook. "Your eyes." I pulled out my phone and looked at my reflection in the black screen. My eyes had started to glow with that same red light. But something was different about me. Unlike the others, I could still think my own thoughts. Maybe because I'd spent my whole life in these swamps. Maybe because the moss hadn't fully taken hold yet. Whatever the reason, I could feel both sides. My own mind, and the hive mind trying to take over. That's when I realized something. Through this weird connection, I could sense the creature's thoughts too. And it had a plan. A horrible plan. The structure the scouts were building wasn't just a nest, it was a breeding ground. And that red moss? It wasn't moss at all. They were spores. Spores that would spread through the water, infect more hosts, create more hives. If we didn't stop it here, this thing would spread beyond the Everglades. First Florida. Then, a splash below made me look down. The water around our tree was rising. No, not rising, moving. All those gators and snakes were stirring up the water on purpose, trying to force us down. "We need to get out of here," I said. "Now." But Sarah was staring at her own hands. Red moss had started creeping up her arms. "Too late," she whispered, her eyes beginning to glow. "It's too late." The warm thoughts pressed harder against my mind. "Join us," they seemed to say. "Become part of something greater." I looked at the skunk ape again. It was watching me, waiting. Like it knew I was different, like it had been waiting for someone like me. And somehow, through our shared connection, I knew what it was thinking. I wasn't meant to be just another puppet. I was meant to be something worse. I was meant to be its general, fighting the warm. Thoughts in my head was like trying to swim upstream in a flood. They kept pushing, showing me pictures of how perfect everything would be if I just gave in. But one thought kept me anchored. My dad's voice, telling me that the swamp was in our blood. This was my swamp, and no monster was going to take it from me. "Sarah," I said, watching her eyes glow brighter. "Remember when we first started working here? Remember why you became a ranger?" She blinked slowly, the red light flickering. To protect, that's right, to protect this place, to protect people." I grabbed her shoulder with my clean hand. "Fight it!" For a moment, I saw the real Sarah trying to break through. But then the skunk ape made a sound, that same underwater whisper, but louder now, and she slipped away. Her eyes fixed on me, empty and red. "Join us, David," she said. But it wasn't just her voice. It was all of them speaking together. The scouts, the officers, even the animals. "You'll understand once you join us." The water kept rising. On the other airboat, one of the officers screamed as the red moss finally reached him. Within minutes, he stood up calmly, his eyes glowing, and dove into the water. When he surfaced, he started walking toward the hive structure like all the others. I looked at my infected hand. The moss had spread past my wrist now. Soon it would reach my heart. And then, that's when I remembered something important.